candidate series. These are candidates who have filed to run for an elected office here at the Greenville County primary. Today, I am happy to introduce Mr. Joe Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds is a candidate for the United States Senate. Welcome, Mr. Reynolds.
Hi, Scott. Great to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me. We're all getting used to these kind of things during the time of COVID, and wasn't really what my campaign wanted to do, but you know, you got to make lemonade from lemons sometimes, and we're all trying our best. Thanks.
Well, I know, and thank goodness we've got this type of technology to be able to meet and talk and learn more about who you are. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Scott. I graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy. I grew up in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. At the age of 17, I was nominated to the Merchant Marine Academy in New York. And I graduated from there in 1987. And ever since then, I've been a licensed Marine engineer in the Merchant Marine. And I've sailed the world, often in support of our military. I've been to the Persian Gulf more times than you can count, through hurricanes, pirate zones. And I've had the honor of bringing our military the equipment it needs when it does these operations like Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I brought Abrams tanks and Apache helicopters over to our troops in Iraq. I met a couple Marines when we were still outside campaigning, and they asked me if I had been responsible for some of the lifts of mine-resistant vehicles over to Afghanistan, and I said I had. And they thanked me for it because they knew that those kind of vehicles were going to help them and they were going to help save lives. So that's the kind of support I've given the troops over my 30 years. I'm a chief engineer now. I run on these container ships. You might see if you're down in the low country, they come up the Wando River, up to Wando Terminal, up to North Charleston Terminal. We carry on these containers right now, we carry mixed goods, some military, some just automotive parts, or it could be melons, it could be pharmaceuticals, bring them over to Europe, and then we make a run back to the US. So that's what I do for a living. And you know, when my ship breaks down in the middle of the ocean, I don't say, well, maybe next year we'll get to it, or maybe next election we'll get to it. We got to get to it right now. And that's the kind of drive and urgency I'm going to bring to the U.S. Senate. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That's wonderful. Well, also tell me a little bit about why you want to run for the United States Senate.
Well, I looked at the Congress as a puzzle to solve. I'm an engineer. I'm often troubleshooting on the ship, and the most gratifying thing is if we find a really intractable problem and our team really puts our heads together and we work our way through it and we finally solve it. That is extremely gratifying to us, and it makes us feel like we've really done something. I started looking at Congress and I was wondering, why is it broken? Americans have a very low approval rating for it, and for good reason. It doesn't seem like they do anything other than get in each other's way and fail to pass a balanced budget every year. So why is it broken? Why can't they get together and make these compromises that we used to make with even Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan? They had their political differences, definitely, but they could come together for the sake of the country and get some things moved forward. Now, we don't do that anymore, and the reason is we don't have the right people up there. The people up there is a political caste. It's almost an aristocracy of people who have been there 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. You know, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was 9 years old, I was begging my dad to watch Happy Days, and he said, no, it's on a school night. Well, guess what? Patrick Leahy and Chuck Grassley were already in Congress then, and they're still there. These people have been there a long time, and they're going to tell you that their experience is necessary for Congress to work, but everybody's looking at it. It's not working. So it's time to change the rules up there. It's time to get some of these players out. I have a constitutional term limit amendment that will work. It's only for the Senate. I have an ethics rule for fundraising up there, because I started to look at it as an engineer. Why is it not working? Well, most of the time these politicians go up to Washington, they think they're going to do good things, but the first thing that happens is their party leadership says, you got to raise money. So they spend half their time up there raising money, when they should be doing things for their constituents, helping the state of South Carolina, helping the country. We got a lot of big problems and they're not really addressing them. Social Security running out, Medicare trust fund running out. We have problems with our infrastructure. We have problems with our healthcare, immigration. They don't really attach themselves to these problems because they don't want solutions. Solutions mean they have to go back to their constituents and explain a vote. So leaders like Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell protect their members from these votes, and then they don't have to vote on anything. They give away their powers to the president, they give away their powers to the judges, and I'd like to claw some of that power back, get the Senate to work as a body that it once did. They used to call it the greatest deliberative body in the world. I don't think we can say that anymore. We basically have a lot of people wandering the halls asking what's for lunch and not a lot else. Occasionally we vote on a judge, and if they really put a gun to their head, they'll get something like the PPP passed. But even then, we have that passed by leadership. Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott don't even know what's in it, and comes to find out, Chuck Schumer slipped them a fast one, and they got trouble with this unemployment program. Well, it's too late now because they don't read the bill, because the leadership just makes the bills, puts them out there, says vote on it. Instead, we got to deliberate on these bills in order to pass them, but we don't have the right people up there. They only want to get reelected. To get reelected, they need money. So it's a vicious circle. I'm only running for one term. That way, I don't raise any money up there. I don't campaign again. I spend all my time on the constituents, on the state of South Carolina and the country. I'm not going up there for my personal ambition like a lot of these characters. I'm not going up there to give hot takes on Hannity or go on the Sunday shows or be a celebrity or, be a wingman to President Trump. I'm going up there as a U.S. Senator to do work for you.
Wow, thank you. We are also joined today by Greenville County Republican Party Executive Committeeman Suzette Jordan. Suzette, do you have any questions for Joe?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, for joining us today. We're glad to have you. My first question, it might be easy for you. I'd like for you to expand on how the Merchant Marines supports our national security. What things do they do for national security?
Well, whenever we have any trouble in the world, ever since 1776, the Merchant Marine has been there. And in the 40s, they developed the Merchant Marine Academy, which is the 5th federal academy after, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. Now, this federal academy puts Merchant Marine officers on vessels throughout the world. And in times of emergency, we help the U.S. military with their needs and their logistics. So, these Apache helicopters, they don't get over to Afghanistan by themselves. They don't get these Abrams tanks over to Iraq by themselves. Anytime we have an emergency, the U.S. Merchant Marine is there and we deliver. That's our motto, we deliver. So we bring all the goods that are necessary for the military to survive. It doesn't even have to be the big ticket items like an Abrams tank. It could be, a screwdriver they need or a part that they desperately need for a helicopter. If they don't have that part, that helicopter can't fly. So we do all kinds of things for the military. I'm on a commercial ship now, but it has mixed cargo. It has some military cargo that we bring to Europe. Some of this is just necessary spare parts that they need. If they didn't have the Merchant Marine, they wouldn't be able to operate. Now, the people who are in the military, they know that. They know what I do. They know how we operate. But a lot of people in America don't really understand it. And right now, the Merchant Marine officer class is shrinking by the year. So unfortunately, as that officer class shrinks, as younger people say, I don't know if there's a career in that. There are fewer American ships, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive and feed my family this way. Then we have fewer mariners, fewer professional officers. Now, to sustain the Merchant Marine, we would need more ships built in America. And there are some programs and some bills that are out there, such as building these LNG ships, LNG carriers, because right now America has an incredible amount of natural gas, and we'd like to ship it overseas to other countries. Well, right now we don't have the LNG carriers, and it's the foreign flag ships that end up taking all the cargo. And the same goes, if you've seen this, the Sunrise in port here in Charleston, it's a cruise ship, but it's flagged overseas. A lot of these companies flag these ships overseas because it's convenient. Now, if President Trump wants America first, he should be on board with this and trying to get to build American ships, put American mariners on those ships, and then we can sustain our military for any emergency around the world.
Okay, well, thank you for your service. You kind of answered my second question, but if you were in the Senate today, what would you do to advise the president or to bring up bills in Congress to strengthen the merchant marine if the numbers are falling?
Right. Well, we do have some subsidies for operating subsidies for American ships, but also a problem that they have in the Department of Defense is they are required to ship containers on American ships, but they often find these loopholes to ship them on foreign ships. And unfortunately, even though we have the space, there becomes this idea that we're going to save money by shipping them foreign, and then the American ships lose out. So I would like to close that loophole, make sure that Department of Defense cargo always goes on American ships. That's going to sustain American cargo, American merchant ships, and American professional mariners.
Okay. Well, I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we have seen that our supply chain of drugs, medical supplies, and even food, I think, have been disrupted by the coronavirus. Based on your background with working with supply chains with the merchant marines, what are some things, what are some remedies that you would put forth to help us not see our disruptions the next time this happens?
Some of the regulations need to be relaxed during these kind of emergencies. And now I just put in for a passport. Obviously, a merchant seaman needs a passport more than a regular person. If they want to put me on a container ship or another cargo ship in a time of emergency, I need to have that passport, but I can't get it because of bureaucracy. So we should fast track some of these items for merchant mariners, for truck drivers, for people who are on that supply chain, and we should loosen some of the regulations. Now, the president's done a good job with his administration in relaxing some of these regulations, but we have to pinpoint in times of emergency where the choke points are. And the choke points for some of these people are that they can't get the documents they need. Those regulations should be relaxed so that during a time of emergency, for a few months at least, they don't need the necessary documents. They don't have to fill out the necessary logbook and submit it in a certain time period, et cetera. And we just get our cargo moving. Now, we had a virus, a computer virus on the ship that recently that struck out all of our maintenance items and everything. But guess what? Mariners deliver. We can still move the ship. We can still do everything we need without these bureaucratic regimes, without these huge, ship maintenance programs that we have to follow. We can still do it because that's the kind of guys we are. We get things done. We see what we need to do. We get the ship from A to B. I've been doing it for 30 years. I've never missed a port. And through hurricanes, through bad weather. When that fuel line breaks in the middle of the English Channel, we don't say, well, maybe we'll get to it tomorrow. You got to get to it now. That's the kind of thing I've done and the kind of grit and drive and urgency I can bring to Congress.
Well, Mr. Reynolds, thank you for that answer. One thing that I did earlier today was go onto your website, look through your website, and just wanted to become a little more familiar with your platform. And you alluded to this just a few minutes ago that you are going to limit yourself to one term. How will limiting yourself to one term affect your ability to be able to accomplish anything with the way that the current political system, how the current political system is set?
Well, there's a couple of answers there, and one is the current political system in the Senate is more a custom and a habit than a reality. The majority and minority leaders aren't really written into the Constitution. They're not part of the Constitution. They're just customs we developed in the 1930s to bring order out of chaos. Now, I've looked at our system in the Senate. You don't have to have a majority leader. He only gets one vote, Mitch McConnell. Chuck Schumer only gets one vote. A person who's a U.S. Senator, and you can see how evenly divided we are. If you have 51-49, a guy like me, I can bring a term limit amendment, and I say to Mitch McConnell, listen, you want my vote on this, that, the other thing, I'm going to fall in line. But you got to get this term limit amendment on the floor. We need to debate it. You need to get ethics rules regarding fundraising. But senators don't want to do that. You know why? Because they don't want to leverage their position to the minority and majority leaders because they like the comfortable existence of getting reelected. If you don't want to get reelected, you can leverage your power in the US Senate to make it work. But these guys are more, these characters we have up there are more interested in getting reelected, really. They get whispered in their ear, you're an important person and you have to get reelected for the safety of the union. But, you know, as Charles de Gaulle said, you know, the cemetery is full of indispensable men. You know, you're not as indispensable as you think you are. So if I go up for one term, I can put that aside. They'll know I'm a free agent. They'll know I'm going to be my own man. I'm going to use my own judgment. I can leverage that power. It's 1 vote out of 100. Mitch McConnell only gets 1 vote. Chuck Schumer only gets 1 vote.
Okay, Mr. Reynolds, I saw this morning that the Senate has returned to Washington, D.C. today to resume business. Do you favor a 4th stimulus that they've talked about? And if so, what do you think it should focus on?
Right now, I'd like to put a pause on stimulus and see where we're at. We're starting to see some of these states opening up. We've seen Governor McMaster. I think he's done a good job. I think we're hopefully, you know, at the right moment to slowly open up. Obviously, people have to use their individual responsibility, their personal responsibility. I've been delivering food to people. The other day, I met a young woman who had asthma. Obviously, with a chronic condition, you can't go like that. You can't go back to work. So that's something that the governor should keep an eye on regarding unemployment. You know, some people who have chronic conditions that don't affect their work or their life, and you don't even notice them. People with asthma are often working all the time, and you wouldn't know it. But if they have asthma in this day and age, that's going to be very difficult for them to go back to work. People who are older, like my parents, they should stay home. So we should all try to use our individual responsibility, try to get this economy started up again and see what happens. If we did have a 4th package, I think the $1,200 really didn't cut it. We're going to have to just cut a check for another $1,200, and that goes straight to the citizens of the United States, and we'll see where we're at after that.
Okay, you have already said that you did support what Governor McMaster did
Yes.
with the COVID-19. As we go forward, are there things that you think that he should focus on, look at, things the Senate and the House and even the President should look at, because things are opening back up, but we're still in uncharted territory. So any ideas, suggestions?
Absolutely. Number 1 is voting. Now, a lot of my Republican colleagues think that mail-in ballots are too susceptible to fraud. I heard my colleague Duke Buckner talk about it and worry about it. I think it's overstated. I think people want to do their civic duty, but this young lady who has asthma, how can she go to the polls, really? She needs to be able to get an absentee ballot reliably, safely, and get it in on time. And we need to relax those regulations. The governor hasn't done it. The legislature hasn't done it. I've appealed to them in an op-ed in the city paper down here to move the election a little bit, postpone it for a couple of weeks, just so we can get our feet on the ground. Campaigns like mine depend on grassroots effort, depend on talking to people. I haven't been able to talk to people for 5 weeks. I know that's the least of the governor's worries right now, but we need to consider all these factors of people who are elderly or even people who just have a chronic condition and could usually go to the polls, but now all of a sudden can't. We need to have Governor McMaster and the legislature look at that to make voting easier. I guarantee the Republicans are going to be surprised. If you have a more relaxed mail-in voting, you're going to get more people who are Republican voting, and I think they'd be pleasantly surprised.
Well, Mr. Reynolds, it was a pleasure talking with you today. Can you give us your website and contact information?
Right. Thanks, Scott. It was great talking to you all today, and I look forward, hopefully, to coming up to your neck of the woods in the next couple of weeks. The website is reynolds2020.com. Shoot me an email. I usually reply. You can see some of my posts on Facebook, and have a great day. Stay safe.
Well, thank you so much. Wasn't this a wonderful interview? Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you'll join us for this next candidate series that we have coming up. If you will, please help us by liking and sharing this interview with others. At this time, we'll say goodbye.
All right. Goodbye.